So after the Civil War came the 14th Amendment. Now, in the 14th Amendment, it sounds like it should be something that the South should honor, right? As you're reading it. But as you get down to the bottom, it sounds very unfair that the North will put this, what I'm about to read to you, in the 14th Amendment, because it really affected negatively against the South. Actually, in the 14th Amendment, it's like the North was treating the South, no matter if you were black or white, as though they were second-class citizens. So I'll read it for you. It says here at the bottom, it says, key provisions also address congressional representation, prohibit individuals who engaged in insurrection from holding office. So in other words, if you had a position in office, that's taken away from you. Wait a minute, what? Yep. The South said, no, because you were in war against us, we're not even going to let you have any kind of power at all. Not until we decide you can have some power. And then to read further down, it says, and invalidate Confederate debts. Invalidate Confederate debts. So if I owned a bank and I lent out, say, $50,000, I expect to get my money back, especially with interest. What the North said to the South was, if anybody owe you any money, guess what? It's wiped clean. Whoa, how unfair was the North against the South? But anyway, the main thing here is it couldn't have been insurrection because the South had already seceded from the North. They were no longer a part of the Union when, prior to the war happening, they had already seceded from the North. So it wasn't insurrection, right? They didn't go against them. They were no longer part of them. It was just one side had warred against another side. That's it. Check this out.
Once the South was reintegrated into the United States, they weren't treated like co-equal sovereign entities. They were treated like a conquered territory. You have this phenomenon in the South of the so-called scallywag, the carpetbaggers coming from the North. This created this powder keg, this response, this outbreak of aggression and frustration because they believed as though the Southern way of life was being destroyed. You had a lot of these conditions that were placed upon the South as the side essentially that lost the war. Their right to self-determination had been taken away from them. A lot of Southern states rejected the 14th Amendment. You even had some Northern states that rejected the 14th Amendment. But through a lot of nefarious, immoral, some would even say unconstitutional measures by way of the radicals in the federal government at the time, these were zealots. These were men on a mission who really sought to validate what they saw as this newly emerging American empire for the sake of the proletarian revolution that Marx and Engels talked about. A lot of the future activism we would see with the communist movement is predicated upon our misconception of race relations in the country and our misconception of what actually took place during slavery, the consequences or the rationale behind the Civil War, and the consequences thereafter.
Although by the middle of the 19th century, slavery still existed all over the world, the American South in particular was singled out and vilified with the help of Karl Marx and Friedrich Engels, not because they actually cared about the slaves, but as an opportunity to further their Marxist philosophy into the United States. While their efforts were effective, one of the biggest challenges they faced in the spread of their philosophy was biblical Christianity.